Isn't she amazing? Right? So the reason I'm retired Sheriff Mark Lamb is because I ran for the U.S. Senate in Arizona. The border was such a problem. What I realized was I could do my job as a sheriff, keeping the wolves from the herd, but at some point somebody had to go out and hunt those wolves, or they were going to continue to multiply, and eventually even the best sheriffs couldn't stop them from coming in overtaking the herd. And so because of that, there's also a Danish saying that says, he who has the ability has the responsibility. And so I felt the responsibility with the border and the other issues to run for the U.S. Senate. I was not successful. Let me just say that I didn't win the primary. I don't want to say I wasn't successful, because I got in the arena. I put my name out. I fought for it. But anyway, I used to always tell my wife, I was like, why don't you just run? People like you better anyway. So I've been the sheriff for Pinal County for 8 years, was elected in 2016, took over when President Trump was elected as president, and took over on January 1st, 2017, and was blessed to serve in that county. If you don't know where it is, it's between Phoenix and Tucson, third largest county. There's only 15 counties in Arizona. Our county is 5,400 square miles, the size of the state of Connecticut. We had 600 employees. We had $60 million budget, 1,500 bed jail. So it was a big job. And people would always ask me, and by the way, if you know who Fridays with Frank is, I used to be Sheriff Lamb, now I'm just Frank's boss. If anybody online watches Fridays with Frank videos. People would always ask me, Sheriff, what's it like being in law enforcement now, with the way that the media treats you guys, with the way law enforcement treats you, or excuse me, the way the politicians treat you, with the way the society has kind of turned on law enforcement in so many places across the country. And I always tell people the same thing. I said, look, the majority of the people we deal with are good people, decent people, normal people. Some of them make mistakes. We got to hold them accountable. 1% of those people deserve to be in jail. And the other percent deserve to never see the light of day again. And half of that percent need to get out of politics. I can always tell how conservative a group is when I get in that joke. You were even sooner than most people. As soon as I said everybody needs to be in jail, 1%, she's like, yeah, put them in jail. But when the people cheer after I say they never deserve to see the light of day again, I don't even get a chance to finish the joke. I know I'm in a good place, right? Look, I am no politician, even though I ran for the U.S. Senate. I am a patriot who loves God, family, freedom, and the Constitution. That's why I do what I do. People ask me, what are you going to do now? And I said, honestly, I don't know. I'm a patriot. I don't like politics, don't really want to be in it. But if we've got to have the common men and women that are willing to get in it, or we're going to continue down the same path we've been going. You know, I ran into Leo. Leo's running for governor. This week I was with your sheriff, Sheriff Barnes, Don Barnes, and then I was also with Chad Bianco at the beginning of the week out at the Major County Sheriff's Association. And I started the week in Dallas. This is going to make sense in a second. Started the week in Dallas. Then I was there for less than 12 hours, 14 hours, something. Then I flew to D.C. I drove to West Virginia, spent a couple days in West Virginia at a training facility, drove back to D.C., flew to Vegas, drove to St. George, Utah, drove back yesterday, got to the airport, got on the plane, sat on the tarmac for 2.5 hours, finally took off because the weather was bad in Arizona. We finally took off. We fly for 30, 40 minutes, and all of a sudden the pilot comes over and he's like, oh, we can't land and we need fuel, so we're going back to Vegas. So we went back to Vegas. We got off the plane, sat there for another several hours, and at 6 p.m. last night they finally said, hey, the flight's been rescheduled till tomorrow morning, which was this morning. The reason why it was because it was raining, and it was raining so much that it had flooded out the airport and planes couldn't land. And it's before Arizona could stop raining, then it started raining in Vegas, and they shut down all their flights, so you couldn't go anywhere. And it reminded me of a statue and something that I've spoke about a lot of times. There's a statue in Wickenburg, Arizona. If you know where Wickenburg, Arizona, it's a little cowboy town. And you used to have to drive right to downtown, and you would pass this statue every time. And it's a statue of a cowboy kneeling down. He's got his duster on. He's got his hat down at his knee, down by his side, and he's clearly praying. And then there's horses right behind him with his nose right on his shoulder. And the statue is by a man named Joe Beeler. And the statue is, "Thanks for the rain." You know, a lot of times we don't understand why the rain comes. I don't know why I wasn't supposed to make it back home yesterday. I may never know. But the rain is always for our benefit. You don't grow anything without water or rain. And frankly, you don't grow much without dung either. You got to fertilize it too. Lately, I've been talking about the crucible of pain, and I'm not going to really talk about it tonight. I will tell you some of my crucible of pain. But really what I want to talk about is where we're at as a country. We're not in a good place. We saw what happened to Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk was a friend. My son used to film for him. He gave my son a job. My son was the one who would stand 5 feet from him, either filming the people asking the questions or either filming Charlie. He hadn't worked for him for several months, but he did that job for a long time. Because Charlie was so active in Arizona, politically, Turning Point, spent a lot of time. I've spoken for Turning Point a lot of times. We saw what happened to President Trump, and to see what happened to Charlie Kirk. And these were Charlie Kirk was the nice guy, right? I did an interview the next day, and I said, look, a day of reckoning is coming, whether it's in this life or the next life. And I don't think these folks are going to like what they find at the end of the road. And we are at that point. If you go all the way back to Abraham Lincoln, before the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln said something which I think is very applicable to today. He said, this was not about ideologies. This was about good and evil, about right and wrong. That was the fundamental difference. The divide was so deep. I would contend the divide is probably even deeper now. Somebody asked Abraham Lincoln once, they said, what do you think will happen? He says, I do not think that the Union will fail. I do not think it'll be dissolved. However, it cannot continue divided. Either it will go all the way the one way or all the way the other way. We can't sit on the fence. It's going to go one way or the other way. Either it's going to go the right way and we're going to follow God and the Constitution, or it's going to go the other way. We talk about the rain. I'm going to tell you a few stories about the rain. The first one I'm going to tell you about is George Washington. And this was December 24th and 25th of 1776. The war had not been going good for the United States, or for the colonials, and George Washington knew this. He actually wrote a letter to his brother, and he says, I think that the game is pretty much up. And so he decided this was so important that he himself would lead this battle. Now, Trenton, the fort that they wanted to take back, was being occupied by the Hessian soldiers. Those were Germans paid by the English to hold that fort. The Hessian soldiers knew the Americans were going to be attacking that fort. On December 24th, George Washington decides to put a plan together. And they decide they're going to cross the Delaware River, and then they're going to march towards Trenton. They decide that they're going to start that at 12 p.m., and they do that. They start to cross, and as soon as they start to cross, it starts to rain. Then it starts to sleet. Then it starts to snow. Then it starts to freeze over. So much so that by the time they made it across, it was 3 a.m. They were 3 hours behind schedule, and it was a full-on blizzard. 1/3 of the army made it across. George Washington could have easily have said, this isn't the right time. We'll do it another time when it's not raining, when it's not snowing, when it's not a blizzard. We'll do it some other time. I guarantee you his soldiers, because I would have been a leader of a large agency, were like, no, we don't need to do this. This is God telling us don't do it. George Washington, the leader that he was, understood the mission. He understood the importance of what they were doing that night. And even more importantly, he understood and was in tune with what God wanted him to do. And that night, they pushed through. They walked 9 miles. Many of them had no shoes. They were leaving bloody footprints in the snow as they walked towards Trenton. Because that blizzard was so bad, because of the rain, they were able to get within 200 yards of Fort Trenton before the Hessian soldiers realized the Americans were upon them. They didn't lose a single soldier that night. I promise you, George Washington knelt down, as miserable as that weather was, and said, "Thanks for the rain." You know, I talk about the crucible of pain. My family and I have been through it. You know, if you've been a politician, I was joking earlier, you want to know what you did wrong in life? Run for office. You'll find out. Whether you did it or didn't do it, you're going to find out exactly what you did. You're going to find out what a terrible person you are. Somebody asked me the other day, they go, "Have you ever looked at your AI, what AI has to say about you?" And I was like, "No." And they said, "Well, this and this." And I go, "Well, that's not true." And they go, "You should fix it." And I was like, "I don't care." But yes, it is not it's not the easiest thing. So I had been through a lot of this. When you become an elected official, you get tougher and tougher as time goes on, right? And then I was a sheriff for a long time. And then COVID happened. And I was one of the only ones in the country saying, "No, we're not going to do the mask mandates. No, we're not going to do the lockdowns. And we're not doing the vaccine mandates." I found out I had COVID at the White House. That's a story for another day. I'm not going to tell you that story today. I don't have enough time. They told me I had 30 minutes up here. I was like, I can't even get through my jokes in 30 minutes. So, lost my train of thought. I took a lot of lumps. You know, people came at me. Here's what my philosophy always was, though. Because they would come at you with a lot of hate. And first of all, my wife, I'm going to save that for later. Have you ever watched the show Rick and Morty? Yeah. I'm going to tell you about, for those of you who haven't seen it, it's a kid's cartoon. It's dumb, but I'm going to tell you a part of it. But first, Aristotle has a great quote. He says, "The only way to avoid criticism is to do nothing, say nothing, or be nothing." And I refuse to not do anything. I refuse to not say anything. And I certainly refuse to not be anything. Rick and Morty has a great quote. Morty says something truthful, yet very unpopular. And he gets up on stage and everybody's like, "Boo, boo," they're booing him. And he grabs the mic and he says, "Your boos mean nothing because I have seen what you people cheer for." I know what ASER stands for. These folks cheer for more taxes. They cheer for abortion, killing unborn children. They cheer on people with mental health issues, telling them they can be a woman or a man, contrary to God's image. They tell you all the things that are not good. I have seen, they cheer for criminals. They cheer for illegal aliens. You guys seen that out here in California? That was a rhetorical question, kind of. Yeah. But we've been through it. And then God put me through something else. You know, I have a couple books back there. We wrote my son had a drug problem, and he was off the wrong path. And we tried to help him for years, and we said, finally we said, "You cannot drive our cars." Well, we leave for an event one day, and I get a phone call towards the end of the event, and he says, "Dad, I just hit a guy on a bike." So we zip back, you know, your world you just laser focus. So you get back there, I see the car, I see him, I check on him, then I walk back and I look at the guy laying on the ground, and the paramedics are working him, and I'm like, "Please don't let this guy die. This is a bad situation already. I don't want it to get any worse. I didn't want the guy to die." And fortunately, the guy does not die. One of the hardest things I've ever done in my life was walk back over to my son, surrounded by deputies, and I looked at him and I said, he was 19 at the time, I think. I looked at him and I said, "I'm sorry, I have to leave you here. If I stay here, they're going to say that I influenced this case in some way." I said, "You're on your own." Went and got in the car, We drove off. And he got charged with an ag assault with a deadly weapon. And it took a couple years. My first book, we'll have those books back there. My wife and I both wrote books so that we could pay for the legal expenses that were incurred because of that. We sold books every weekend while my son continued down the wrong path. And I would tell him, I'm out here selling books. Your mom and I are going to gun shows. We're doing this over and over again, and you are still doing it wrong. And he says, I'll pay you back. And I said, I don't want you to pay me back. I want you to be better. I'll tell you that's an important part. I'll tell you something about that in a second. Eventually, he did get better. He got cleaned up. He had a fiance. They had a baby. Now he goes to jail. Guess whose jail he went to? My jail. So my wife's book is called The Sheriff's Wife, Holding It All Together Behind the Scenes in Politics. And I told him, you're going to write a book called The Sheriff's Son, Surviving Fentanyl and My Dad's Jail. So he gets out. Now his daughter's 11 months old. He gets out in October. December comes around. And some of you may know this story. December 16th, he goes to work. And he and his wife had finally pulled themselves out of the quagmire of their bad decisions and the drug abuse for years. They had finally gotten out of it, paid off all their fines. Their baby is beautiful, 11 months old. Goes to work on a Friday, doesn't come home. She went to pick him up, took the baby. We, at 8:30 at night, my wife and I had been busy, just wrapping presents and doing different things. And 8:30 at night, we get a knock on the door. We open the door, and it's the sheriff from the neighboring county, 2 of my chiefs, and 2 guys from a local PD. And immediately, we knew it wasn't good. My chief looked at me, and he's known my kids since they were little kids, and he looked at me and just said, Cooper and the baby are dead. In an instant, we lost my 22-year-old son, my 11-month-old granddaughter, and my daughter-in-law died a few days later. Somebody driving 80 miles per hour under the influence of drugs and alcohol. At his funeral, we went through all his stuff, and we found something, because I had told him we were going to write the book, so he had started kind of putting some notes together. And one of the things that he had written was, and my wife had to read this at the funeral. I told her, you're much stronger than me to be able to speak at the funeral. But in there he put, my dad used to always tell me, just be better. We have to be better. We're not doing good as Republicans. We're not doing good as Americans. We have allowed the freedoms that people fought so hard to give us, we have allowed them to be stripped away from us for the trade-off of comfort. But what Benjamin Franklin says, those who would give up essential liberties for temporary safety deserve neither safety nor liberty. And we have given it up. We have not been good stewards. We need to be better. But that crucible of pain, all that rain, my wife and I have many times, even though we lost our kids, we have thanked our Heavenly Father for the time we had with Him, and we have said, thanks for the rain. Because it has made us better, stronger, brought us together closer as a family. My wife and I hit 31 years married. I look like an old catcher's mitt, but she still looks good, right? We have had a ton of rain. Like, the border has been a total disaster. The last 4 years under Joe Biden and that administration they were weaponizing against patriots. They went after everybody at January 6th. I mean, the list goes. Parents at school boards, Catholics, churches. They were going after everybody. They were tearing away America. The border, I won't dive into a ton of it, but the border, they allowed what they say is about 11 million. I think that number on a conservative end is at least 15 million under that 4 years. Majority of them, millions of them, military-age men. Many of them scraped off the streets of third world countries that didn't want them anymore and shoveled into our country to be to take away from the hard-earned dollars that we have for our welfare programs in this country. And then they victimize Americans. The drugs and the stuff is off the charts. The fentanyl, the fake GLP-1 drugs, the weight loss drugs, the cocaine. Cocaine, by the way, is on the rise. Methamphetamines. Do you realize since this year they've recovered 4,500 pounds of fentanyl powder? Do you have any idea how much 4,500 pounds of fentanyl powder is? That's about 2,000 kilos. 2,000 kilos. You can make anywhere between 500,000 and 1,000,000 pills per kilo. Times that by 2,000. That's the amount of fentanyl pills that could have been made with the 4,500. How many didn't we catch? How much more didn't we catch? I mean, I've always said we've been getting attacked. This is a terrorist attack. No enemy has ever had success killing Americans like the cartels in China have in the last 4 years, killing about 100,000 Americans a year with fentanyl poisonings. And yet we're just sleeping right through it. And we ask ourselves, hey, Sheriff, do you think there'll ever be a terrorist attack? Because we've been conditioned to see it as bombs going off or bullets or planes crashing into buildings, when in reality, they've done this without firing a single shot. And without setting off a single bomb, they've managed to kill about 100,000 Americans a year. The border was a complete disaster. Voting, changing the demographic of America. And when I say the demographic of America, it's white, black, Hispanic, Asian, Native American. That's America. What they brought in were people that have no allegiance to this country. They're not Americans. They don't have allegiance to this country. Therefore, they don't care about this country. Very few, the ones who do care, go through the legal process. And everybody else cut them in the line. I'm glad to say, and I'm happy to report, that the border is much better now. We went from yes, and that's President Trump. And I'll tell you this last thing about the border for any ammunition for out there, because when they ran that border bill last year, they ran that border bill so that it was for purely political reasons. They knew that they would never go through, but they wanted to tell the voters that the Republicans didn't want border security. That was not a border bill. That was a global assistance bill. It had way more money going to Ukraine and Israel and all different places than it actually had going towards the border. And the border, here's some of the numbers that they wanted to do. They wanted to take $2 billion of your tax dollars and give it to the NGOs who had been funding. The government does it, they do it, but they give it to the NGOs so they can later say, I didn't do that. The NGOs, so they could fund the global migration. There was $9 billion that was going to go to the State Department, which ultimately would have ended up in the hands of the UN for by their words, global migration. That bill would have been a complete and utter disaster for this country. It would have codified into the law a lot of bad things. And thank goodness it didn't pass. And thank goodness the voters saw through it. And all we didn't need more laws. What we needed was new leadership. And that usually is the case. We need leadership to carry us through those tough times. I'm going to tell you another story about the rain. Because now the rain, what that did, and my wife and I were talking about this, what we saw in the last 4 years, it exposed the people who were trying to tear this country down. And it woke up so many Americans to say, wait a second, I'm not okay with this. Had we not had the rain, they would have continued to just tear away at it. Before we would have realized we would have had nothing left. But that rain is what actually woke us up. I don't know if you guys know who Sybil Ludington is. Sybil Ludington, 16-year-old girl. Soldier comes riding in. Her dad was a colonel in the colonial army. And they had sent all their troops home to deal with their farms, because these were not soldiers. They were men and women who were farmers, and they were just regular folks. Sent them home to deal with their cattle and their farms and their families. One night, a rider comes in, And it's a terrible pouring rain. He rides in and he tells the colonel, hey, the English are marching on Lexington and Concord. And bam, he collapses in exhaustion. Now he has to get this message across the countryside to tell everybody, all his troops, that the English were coming. So his daughter says, hey, Dad, I can do this. I know where everybody lives. She was 16 years old. Any father in here would say, no way am I letting you ride that horse across the countryside, which was full of English soldiers and English sympathizers. And so Colonel Ludington says, no. She says, Dad, you don't have another choice. Like, this is it. And so ultimately, he says, okay. And she gets on that horse and rides all night through a driving rainstorm. And she rides all the way into the morning, was able to mobilize the troops, and they were able to stop the march on Concord. She that night rode 20 or 40 miles, twice as far as Paul Revere rode, and never got caught, too. Paul Revere got caught. But the moral of that is that had it not been for the rain, she likely would have been caught. So I guarantee you, Colonel Ludington, Sybil Ludington, probably knelt down in prayer and said, thanks for the rain. We're in a place in this country where we have to get our wits about us. There's a scripture that I love. It's 2 Timothy 1:7. For God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. I love this scripture because I think those three things encapsulate the mindset that we should have right now. Number one is the power. We have to take back the power. What's the power in this country? Constitution, freedom. Yeah, Jesus first. Yeah, God and Jesus. We the people. We the people is the power. Do you guys know why zebras have stripes? I was going to tell you anyway, so even if you would have said, yes, I know, it's not like I was going to move on. So scientists wants to understand why zebras have stripes. So some people think it's camouflage for their surroundings, right? But that's not. A lion is tan. It could be 2 feet in front of you. You wouldn't see it. A zebra could be a mile out there, and you'll see it standing out there. So he's like, I want to understand what the zebra stripes are for, because it's oddly out of place. So he goes out. He's watching this herd of zebra, and he sees this zebra, and he looks at it. He's like, makes a note, looks back up, but that zebra had mixed in with the other zebras. So he's like, I got an idea. Tomorrow I'm going to take my Jeep, I'm going to take a can of paint, and I'm going to paint a red X on the butts of a few of these zebras. So the next day he does it. Gets his Jeep, gets the paint, rides out there, paints an X on the butts of a few of the zebras. Comes back, thinks he's pretty slick, gets up the next morning. Guess what? The predators ate those zebras. What he found was they could not hunt the herd. They had to identify one and be able to pull him off from the herd to be able to hunt him. The other thing he realized is that the zebra stripes were not camouflage from their surroundings. They were camouflage for each other. It was the we the people principle. As long as they stood together as a herd, their zebra stripes was their protection. This is why they try to drive a wedge every day amongst you for race, religion, politics, COVID. Whatever they can drive a wedge into you for, they will. It is not by happenstance. It is 100% by design. And they do it because they know the power is we the people. And if they can divide us, they can hunt us. And that is what they've been doing. So we have to take back our power. One other thing I tell you, because I know you guys are strong on the Second Amendment, and I always say this for law enforcement, because I've been doing all these. Do you guys go on, if you go on YouTube, go to @RealAmericanSheriff. I've been doing these body cam reviews, and I would love to have your follow. But anyway, I watch these body cam reviews, and I just see that more and more of these law enforcement officers, they're so hesitant to act because they don't have leadership that follows them. And society has said, if you're too aggressive, we're going to hold you accountable. And it's hard to watch because I think people get hurt, either the cops or somebody else. And so I've always said that this is a good analogy of it. Anybody know what Aesop's fables are? I love Aesop's fables. I will forewarn you, Aesop's fables do not end well. That's your warning, okay? This is about the lion and the farmer's daughter. The lion comes along, he sees this beautiful girl, and he falls in love with this farmer's daughter. Immediately, he's smitten. And so he starts to court her, and the farmer is very uneasy with this. So one day the farmer says, look, I don't know if I like you dating my daughter. You have these sharp teeth, you got these sharp claws, and I'm afraid you're going to hurt her. And he says, no, you don't understand. Like, this is what I use to protect her. I have sharp teeth and sharp claws to protect her. And he says, I don't know. Well, the lion just continued. They fall madly in love. And one day the lion shows up and he says, I want to marry your daughter. And the farmer says, you can marry her on one condition. You remove your teeth and claws. So the lion goes home and he thinks about it, but he's so in love. And so he comes back the next day. He goes and gets his teeth and his claws removed. He comes back and he says to the farmer, he says, look, I've removed my teeth and my claws. And the farmer picks up a club and clubs him over the head to death. The moral to the story is never give up your power. I don't care if people are offended by it. I don't care if people are threatened by it. Our power, goes to the Second Amendment. I usually tell this story about the Second Amendment. Never give up your claws, never give up your teeth. It doesn't make you bad. Jordan Peterson says, a warrior is somebody who has a sword, who knows how to use it, but keeps it sheathed. That's a true warrior. You're not doing society any good if you're a weak man. That is not moral. You need to be a warrior, a tempered warrior. So we've got to take back the power. Second, love. How do you take care of a dark room? Turn on the light, right? You cannot combat darkness with more darkness. Our initial feelings when you see things like what happened to Charlie Kirk is anger, and we want to go on the war path. But that's dark. That's what we can't go down that road necessarily. We've got to stay focused. We've got to keep our wits about us. The way you do this is through light. In politics, people say the worst things about you. You know, two things that helped me all the time was somebody said one day, they said, Sheriff, you could be the juiciest, ripest, most delicious peach in the bushel. And somebody will walk along and go, I hate peaches, right? They just may not like peaches. You can't let that affect you. You cannot let that affect you. You've got to show the love still. My wife, when we were running for Senate, you get all these people, they don't like what you say, even amongst our own Republican Party, right? You get so locked into one candidate that you hate the other one, which is totally destructive to our party, right? But my wife has saying, she says, we're going to bury them in an avalanche of love and light. And honestly, we need to bury this country in an avalanche of love and light. I have said for a long time, there is only one way back in this country. It's actually two things, but it's one way. And it's God and the Constitution. If we don't get on that path, we're going to lose our country. It's not rocket science. It's really getting back to the basics of this country being built on our Christian faith and our belief system. And number two, this country being built by men who the Constitution had God's stamp of approval on it, was a simple and direct document that covered everything, and we have still, hundreds of years later, we're still benefiting from it, despite the onslaught of attacks from people who would like to remove it or change it or destroy it. It has still weathered those tests. It's hanging on, but it's still there. God and the Constitution is the way back. We have to be better. There's a quote that's erroneously attributed to Alexis de Tocqueville, who wrote Democracy in America. Frenchman sent here in the early 1900s or 1800s to understand the American penal system and the Constitution. And the quote goes, I searched America for her greatness and genius in her commodious harbors and her ample rivers, and it was not there. In her fertile fields and in her boundless prairies, and it was not there. In her rich mines and in her vast world commerce, and it was not there. Not until I went into the churches of America and discovered her pulpits aflame with righteousness, did I understand her genius and power. America was great because she was good. And if America ever ceased to be good, America will cease to be great. Our greatness is our goodness. We can't be giving money to everybody in the world. We've got to fix some issues here at home. That's what we have to focus on. Just because we can't afford to pay for other people's bills doesn't mean we're not good. We're still good. We are good. And our goodness is what will carry us through. The last thing is to be of a sound mind. This is a tough one. How many of you woke up and within the first few minutes you're grabbing your phone, right? You're looking at it. You're like, and immediately you're ticked off. What? I can't believe that. You're so mad. Or you turn on the news. You know what a flashbang is? So a flashbang is a little canister. It's like a grenade, but there's no shrapnel. So we use it when we serve search warrants. You pull the pin, you throw it in, boom. It's a bright light, a loud noise, and a percussion. It's designed to take away your hearing, your vision, and discombobulate you. And then we come in and take control of you. We have been flashbanged. And you better get your wits about you real quick, or we're in real trouble. We are on some stormy seas. You know, we've got to have people that are not afraid to go up and take the helm of the ship. Publius Syrus says that anybody can hold the helm when the seas are calm. Can you hold the helm when the seas are rough? And that's where we're at. I don't know how long they'll be rough. I don't think it's going to calm down anytime soon. I think the divide is very deep. I wish I could tell you different. But I think we're in for a ride. We're in for some tough times. And it's going to be upon us as Americans, freedom-loving, God-loving patriots, to save this country. There's a quote in a book by James Allen, As a Man Thinketh. If you haven't read it, it's a great book. Put it on your monthly reading list. I promise you, your mental health will thank you for it. It is a great book to teach you how to really kind of keep your wits about you in these tough times. But the very last paragraph says, keep your hand firmly upon the helm of thought. In the bark of your soul reclines the commanding master. He does but sleep. Wake him. Self-control is strength. Right thought is mastery. Calmness is power. Say unto your heart, peace be still. We all have a commanding master inside of us. You need to wake him or her up, and you need to get him up to the helm of the ship to navigate these difficult waters. You've got to keep your wits about you at these times. Control what you can control. I talk to youth all the time. I tell them 3 things. Be authentic. Don't be afraid to do the uncomfortable work. And the most important one, because this is the root of most of the unhappiness and anxiety and anger in this world, surrender the outcome. There is so much you cannot control. You can't control what happens in their house or your house. You can only control what happens in your life, your house. If you're an elected official, maybe your bailiwick is a little bit bigger. You've got to focus on that and surrender the outcome on the rest. I carried a gun and a badge, and I did DUI investigations all the time. There was nothing I could do to save my kids. That was outside of my control. So what could I control at that point? My wife and I could control our attitude and how we would push forward. That's what we could control. And that's what we focused on. The best, most peaceful thing for me has been to surrender the outcome. I can't control what they do in Washington, D.C. I tried. I didn't make it. I can't control it. I can't control what you guys do. You guys are off the rocker here in California. Not you guys, but these daggone politicians in California are crazy. I can't control that. So why would I work myself up into a lather over it? That's beyond my control. You've got to focus on what you can control. If you want more control, go look for it. Go get it. But control what you can control. Surrender the outcome. I'm going to tell you 2 stories, and then I'm going to end and open up for questions because I think I've probably already gone over the time. These are 2 of my, I'm okay? All right. I'm going to tell you two stories, and I decide right now which one I'm going to tell first. I'll tell this one first. I don't think there is any age limit where you could, sometimes we think, well, I'm getting too old for this, or I'm too young, or I'm this, or I'm that. There is a role that every one of you can fill. Some of you can give money. Some of you can't. Some of you should run for office. Some of you should not. Some of you can pass out flyers. There's so much you can do. Make phone calls, support good candidates. There is so much you can do. So you've got to find what it is that you can do. And you've got to persevere. This story is about perseverance, and it's about it's never too late to be somebody, do something, or make a difference. April 19th, 1775, the day after Paul Revere rode through the countryside, and then he got caught in the morning, but he notified enough people, and one of those men that he notified was a 78-year-old man named Samuel Whittemore. Now, Samuel Whittemore was a veteran of the French and English War. As a matter of fact, he had taken a couple pistols and had taken a sword from a Frenchman. He hears the English are marching, and he's like, you know what? I'm doing something about this. His wife had wanted to move to the countryside because she probably knew the propensity of her husband. But he hears this, and he decides, I'm doing something about it. He goes home, gets his rifle, loads his two pistols, takes his sword, puts it in his belt, and he goes out towards where the English are coming from. As they get rebuffed in Concord, they're now coming back, or Lexington, one of the two. They were successful, one, not the other. They're coming back. He's hiding behind a wall, and as they get within reach, he stands up, pulls up his rifle, boom, bam, shoots the first one. Englishman goes down. Takes his two pistols, bam, bam, shoots two more. Then he takes out his sword. And by this time, the English had had enough. They've leveled their rifles. They shoot him, hit him in the face. He goes down. They walk up on him. They hit him with the butts of their rifles no less than a dozen times. They stab him with their bayonets 8 to 10 times. And when they walked away, they left that 78-year-old patriot laying in a puddle of his own blood. An hour or two later, when his neighbors and his family found him, do you know what he was doing? He was loading his guns. That man lived another 18 years and died at the age of 96 years old. That's perseverance. That's patriotism. That's doing what you can, regardless of where you're at in life. I'm sure that man wished he was probably 50 or 30. I keep saying to my wife, I wish I was in my 30s for all this. I'd have a lot more energy. That man did something. We can all do something. You've got to dig down deep and find the patriotism in you that is not afraid to go out and confront the English on the way back, even if you're alone. The last story I'll tell you is one of my favorite stories, and this is the story of General Mad Anthony Wayne. If you don't know who he is, he was General Washington's favorite general, and they had had a fort taken from him called Stony Point. And George Washington comes to him and says, General, do you think you can take back Stony Point? He said, Sir, you issue the order, I'll storm hell. So George Washington says, all right, let's do it. So they decide, they come up with a plan. He goes and finds 1,200 of his best soldiers from all these different regiments, comes back, and they decide they're going to take the only advantage they have because the English were in the fort, so they were going to have to go up a hill and try to attack this fort. And so they decide they're going to do it at night. Now, there's no night vision. They got these white bands, and they put these white feathers in their hats. They did not load any balls in their guns. They only put their bayonets on their guns. Why? Because if one of them were to trip at night, they would set off their rifles and alert the English who were coming. Well, they start to attack, and at some point the balls do start to fly. And boom, General Mad Anthony Wayne gets hit in the head, goes down. Very reminiscent. When I saw what happened to President Trump, it reminded me a lot of what happened to General Mad Anthony Wayne. His men, I'm sure, jumped on him, and he said to his men, carry me into that fort. And so they got up, they took him in there, they took that fort, and at 2 a.m. in the morning, he wrote a letter to General George Washington, and he only wrote 2 lines. And if you ever get a chance to go see Glenn Beck's collection, Glenn Beck actually has this letter that General Mad Anthony Wayne wrote to General Washington. These were the 2 lines. He said, "General Washington, the fort and garrison with Colonel Johnston is ours. Our officers and our men behave like men who are determined to be free." So my question to you is, will we behave like men and women determined to be free, or will we continue to stand by as evil prevails, or as people who would do harm to our country and our freedoms and take them away, continue to have success? I am determined to be free. I'm making a new challenge coin. So the challenge coin is me. So back in COVID, it was Thanksgiving during COVID season, right? And everybody's trying to tell you that you couldn't go anywhere for Thanksgiving. Do you remember that? Do you remember this idiocy? All right. So I decide one day I come into work, and we weren't doing any of that anyway. But I come into work, and I said to my photographer, I go, "Hey, get your camera." And I go and I pull the Constitution off the wall, and I grab my gun, and we drive out to this road. And then we take a picture, and I'm holding the Constitution in this hand, and I'm walking across the road, and I've got my gun in this hand. And it says on there, the picture, it said, "Do you know where I'm going for Thanksgiving? Wherever the hell I want." I tell you that because I'm doing a new challenge coin with that picture. I'm going to have me walking with the Constitution. And on the back of the coin, I'm going to put, "I was born free, I have lived free, and I will die free." So as I close here tonight, thank you so much for having me. Look, I like the Republican assemblies because I think that you guys espouse the issues like less government, more freedom, Second Amendment, no taxes, all the things that we should stand for as Americans. You guys do it. And so thank you for being here and standing up for those things. So my prayer as we leave here tonight is that God grant us the same faith and strength and courage exhibited by those patriots of old who pledged their lives and their fortunes that we might be free. And I pray that when you kneel down at night, you'll thank the Lord for the rain. God bless all of you. Thank you for coming here tonight. God bless America. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you. I don't know how much time we have for questions, but I'm open for questions. We got a few minutes for questions. Yes, sir. So I don't know how I want to answer this question. I'm going to answer it truthfully. All right? It's not as bad as, look, 2020 was a disaster. I think 2020 was a large-scale theft, okay? 2022, I think, is a little bit misleading, okay? I'm going to tell you the real numbers, and you guys can make it up, your minds up for your own. We lost the governor's race in 2022 by 17,000 votes, okay? On that same ticket, our treasurer won by 300,000 votes. So now your first inclination may say they cheated. 60,000 Republican ballots did not vote for governor or senator. 74,000 ballots wrote in things like Goofy, Donald Duck, and Mickey Mouse. 152,000 ballots had legitimate write-in candidates. We lost because we didn't vote, or we didn't vote for the candidate that we had on the ballot. The treasurer obviously you can say nobody cares about that position, so then all the Republicans voted for it. And that person won by 300,000. We lost the governor's race by 17,000. So you could, and then the two contentions were that the machines were not working the day of the election. That's true. Totally unacceptable. Totally unacceptable. But guess who else that affected? The treasurer. She still had 300,000 votes, so she might have got more. Or the paper not being the right size. So while there is problems in Arizona, one of our problems is we allow you to vote we allow you to turn in your mail-in ballot up until the day of the election, which causes a 10-day delay. And then it makes it seem like all sorts of shenanigans are going on. And really, frankly, it does leave the door open for that. And so we got to do better, but we have to do better. I'm one of these people that I worked in an industry where you have to accept hard truths. Evidence matters. Feelings don't. Okay? We get too caught up in our feelings and we want to believe a narrative that suits what we think, instead of really focusing on what maybe we just didn't run the right candidate. Maybe we're not running the right people. That has to do with it. So, and look, a lot of the right people don't want to run. We don't give them a reason to run. We're like each your own in here. You know what I mean? And then you get out against the Democrats, and they will spend millions to destroy you and your family. And the average person is going to say, any sane person is going to say, no, I'm not doing that. It takes insane people like me and Leo to do it, right? So, yes, we have problems. I think we're doing better. A lot of our voter rolls are cleaned up. The biggest thing that we can do in this country is we've got to stop mail-out ballots. And people are not going to like that. I'm sorry. We used to never do it. Now all of a sudden that we can't live without it, you know? So she had a question if I have an opinion about the Constitution of Police Officers and Sheriff's Association. Okay, any industry, any organization you have is going to have people that hate it and love it. If you don't, then you're not doing anything, right? You haven't touched a nerve, then if you don't have haters, then you didn't stand for anything. So I'm good friends with Richard Mack. I ran an organization called Protect America Now, which I kind of let go when I decided to run for Senate, because I just didn't have the time. And what we were active sheriffs defending the Constitution. We were against poor immigration laws. We stood for all the things that we stand for in this room. And so I kind of ran a parallel thing. I think what they're doing is right. They've been doing it for a long time. Some sheriffs don't like it, some do. So you're going to get a mixed review on it, but that's like anything. Right? You're going to get a mixed review on it. So I think they stand for the right things. Here's the problem when you have you've got to be careful, because while the sheriff is one of the best positions in this country, the sheriff in Delaware has no power. East Coast sheriffs, they run the jails. They don't really go out on the road. You come out in the West, we're full service sheriffs. The Constitution in California for what the sheriff can do and in Arizona are different. The Constitution, what Arizona and Mississippi are different. So it's not a blanket you can throw on everything. You have to understand that when somebody says, you're the sheriff, you should be able to do this, it's still based on your constitution, your state constitution, as what authority the sheriffs have. And so I think you got to be careful that these organizations don't throw a blanket on it, because every state, every sheriff has different authority, different power that's been vested to them through their state constitutions. Does that make sense? Oh, absolutely. So there is nothing in the Constitution about sheriffs. Power to sheriffs only comes from state constitutions. We are part of the executive branch, but there's nowhere in the Constitution that lays out the position of sheriff. So that's a state thing. So our power comes to the states. So while we swear an oath to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States. This is why when people would say to me, well, you're one of those constitutional sheriffs, and I go, yeah. And they go, what, is that a bad thing? I go, what you should be asking is not me why I'm upholding the Constitution. You should be asking the other politicians why they're not, because they swore the same oath that I did to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and the state constitution as well. So, yes, that is what I would like to see more sheriffs do. I go all across this country, and I thought COVID was a perfect example of where a lot of leadership, not just sheriffs, but a lot of leadership in this country, they dropped the ball. They didn't stand up when they should have. So, I don't do what I do for money, okay? I'm a patriot. But I also spent the last 2 decades as a police officer making, my take home as a sheriff was, so I got paid $100,000 a year. All 15 sheriffs in the state of Arizona got paid the same amount. My take home that hit my bank account every month was $5,400. And I ran an agency with 600 employees. I took all the media would take the skin off my back every chance they had it. I went to every board meeting I went to, 2 or 3 people would get up and take the skin off my back. And I did it for $5,400 a month. So I don't do this job for money, but the governors in Arizona, you know how much it pays? $95,000 a year. There's no governor's mansion. It pays $95,000 a year. And I just am not in a financial place where I could, and to run for that. Plus, I'm good friends with Andy Biggs, who is currently running for governor in Arizona. So, yeah. I don't know if I'm done with politics. I don't love it. I don't know. I feel like my voice right now, Charlie Kirk is a great example. Charlie could have run for probably any office in Arizona and won. But Charlie understood that his voice was much more powerful the way he was doing it, and nobody mobilized the youth like Charlie Kirk did. Had he gone to office, that wouldn't have been the same. I was telling somebody at dinner tonight, the second if you go to Congress, you're now part of the 9% approval group, right? No matter how good you are, you're like, I hate them. They're in Congress. 9% approval. Right here. Yeah. Yeah, 2. Oh, 3. Okay, so I'm going to answer the third one first because I don't know who he is. So I would have to look into that. So I don't know. So he kept it. I'll have to look into it. So I don't know. I don't know that one, but the first one, I didn't run against Kerry. I ran for the U.S. Senate. Okay, when I went out and ran, I never talked about anybody else but what I brought to the table. I would say, this is what my skill set is. This is why I think I'm right for the position, and I hope you vote me in. And so I just said, I'm not running against anybody. I'm running for the position. And I thought that kept me in a good place. I thought it didn't do damage to the Republican Party in Arizona, because that could have easily have gone really south if Kerry and I started getting at odds. So my philosophy was, if I didn't win, she needed to win. Whatever it was, one of us needed to win. And what was the second one? Oh, probably me. Yeah. I don't know that I would take the job, but I think I would be the best for it. But that's not arrogance, it's just confidence. No. Oh, one more. Yeah, last one. I'm getting the hook. Let me tell you the problem in this country. It's judges. Judges is the problem. The founding fathers understood something very simple. They said, this is the executive branch, this is the judicial and the legislative branches. This is what your powers are, this is the lane you're supposed to stay in. Legislative branch has become so political that it's become feckless. They're totally useless, they're not getting anything done, and when they do things, it's giving money to other people. So they have done nothing. So what has that done? It's opened it up for the judicial branch to legislate from the bench with bad decisions, and then it bogs the system down. And look at how they're using it. They've weaponized the judicial. They will go judge shop. And look, we did that. We knew which judges to take search warrants to. We knew, because there were certain judges that were going to be like, no. And there were other judges that would sign off on the search warrant. So judges are a problem. They legislate from the bench, and they've become more political over time. And here's something about that article. It says in there, many people believe that judges are in there for a lifetime appointment. Judges, federal judges, or Supreme Court justices. There's a key piece of that people overlook. It says you will serve on good behavior. And what we need is to hold these judges accountable for bad behavior. And the last thing is the executive branch is doing all executive orders. And so all of that is just undone the next time the next guy comes in. And I'm not really for executive orders, but I'm also for getting stuff done. So it's kind of this odd place to find yourself as a true conservative and a true conservative. Judges, if I were to do the things, or if I were to arrest people based on politics, and I would be done. They would put me on the Brady list. They would probably throw me in jail for deprivation of rights. Yet the judges do it without impunity. You want to know how you solve crime in this country? It is really simple. You make judges accountable. If they are accountable for releasing somebody back into the community that then hurts somebody else, and they were open to be sued personally for that, they won't release a daggum soul from that jail. They have no problem taking qualified immunity from police officers who are called to the calls. We have to make split-second decisions. These people have all the time in the world to review legal briefs and cases, and yet they still screw it up. We have to make split-second decisions, and they have no problem taking away qualified immunity from us. Yet they want to have total immunity for anything they do. And so you want to fix the judicial or the crime in this country, hold judges accountable. And if they don't like it, we'll give them the same answer everybody gives us. Well, then you shouldn't have taken the job.